duty, honor, country dictate what you ought to be, what you can be, what you will be.
The destiny of man is not measured by material computations. When great forces are on the move in the world, we learn we're spirits, not animals.
Now, we are the masters of our fate.
Howdy, gents, and welcome back to another season of the Wolf and Iron podcast. I'm your host, Mike Yarbrough, founder and curator of wolfandiron.com. And I wanted to say a couple things before we kick things off here, just because this is a new season. You guys have been really patient, and I really appreciate that. When Wolf and Iron began the podcast in 2016, I think there was probably around 3,000 or so followers on Facebook. We've experienced a lot of growth in that time, and so now we're pushing 18,000. I don't know what it'll be once this podcast comes out, but we're getting pretty close to the 18,000 followers mark. And one of the things that's been really cool about seeing this growth is that you guys have been asking, where's the podcast? When's it going to kick off again? What's the deal? And you've been really patient about it. And I've had a lot of really good feedback from you guys as well, saying things like, this podcast is really different. The kind of questions that you ask are really different. It seems like more of a conversation. There's something that's just not typical about it, and we want more of it. So I'm happy to say we're back in the game. The podcast is kicking off. There's going to be a little bit of a different format now. I think we had about 13 episodes prior to this one. And I got a lot of great feedback from you guys on the episodes where I just took some time to talk to you about some things that were on my mind and on my heart. And I really want to be able to do more of that. So there's going to be some episodes which are kind of like this, where I'm interviewing somebody, but there's probably going to be more where I'm actually just having an opportunity to talk to you guys. So be on the lookout for some changes, but I think it's going to be good. I always welcome your feedback. The other thing I want to put out there is this. The goal of Wolf and Iron is to change men's lives. And one of the ways that we're going to do that is through the conversation that's taking place through social media. And getting content out there like this that help men build up themselves and their families and make the change in society, that's really important. That's really where you guys come in. I know you guys want to help, and I know you want to be a part of this, and I know you want to change for yourself, but you also want to see a change in the culture. And there's a couple of ways that you can do that. Each podcast like this one takes about 2.5 hours for me to create. It's about an hour or so for the interview time, and then about another hour and a half listening to it, doing the editing and mix down, and then all of the promotional materials that have to go out with it and everything else. So it's about a 2.5 hour commitment on my end. I would love for you guys to take about 2.5 minutes and leave a review. Leave a review for this podcast. If you're really excited about what Wolf and Iron's doing, that's a great way to let people know. Not only that, but go out and share the content as well. You guys do a really good job of sharing content. That's one of the reasons that Wolf and Iron is growing. But don't think for a moment that somebody else is going to do it. If we want to see a change take place, we've got to step up and make it happen. All right, let's get into some of the official podcast stuff here. I'm really excited to be opening up the season with this particular topic because it's meant a lot to me over the last year of my life. And when we talk about things like vulnerability, what we're really trying to get to is, how do we look at ourselves in the mirror and say, this is the reality of who we are and what we're going through, the things we're good at, the things we're not good at. And there's a lot more surrounding this, which is why we've dedicated a podcast to it. But it's also a conversation that guys don't have. We don't talk about being vulnerable. We don't talk about being authentic and being genuine. And we need to, because change cannot occur where we do not see change needing to take place. And so I'm really excited to introduce my friend here, author and speaker, Jason MacKenzie. Mr. Jason MacKenzie, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Mike. It's great to be on your show.
All right. So in the spirit of full disclosure here, you are Canadian, correct?
That is correct. I am a full-blooded Canadian.
Okay. So if there's any problems with the audience understanding, maybe, your accent or anything like that, we'll just, we'll clear all that kind of stuff up.
Yeah, I'm going to do my best. You may need to do some, post-production editing.
I don't know why Americans always give Canadians such a hard time. I think maybe it's because we know that you guys are probably not going to shoot back at us. If you can stay in the cold, you can stand a couple of jabs.
I think you're right. It's funny. One time I was down in South Carolina. I was at a hotel checking into a hotel, and the lady working behind the desk goes, "Well, that's a really interesting accent. Where are you from? Kentucky?"
Yeah, right. Kentucky. Yeah. No, you don't sound like you're from Kentucky, but okay, maybe from South Carolina's point of view, maybe you do.
Right.
Well, it's good to talk to you, and I did want to ask a Canadian question. So in the spirit of vulnerability here, full transparency, just be open and honest. This is probably a well-kept secret amongst yourselves, but Canadian bacon, it's really just tiny ham, right?
That is correct. I'm not sure. I'm not sure really why it's called bacon, but it's really just kind of like pea meal. You know, like pea meal ham or whatever.
Yeah. Okay. All right. See, we're cracking it open here. I knew that.
Yeah.
You can't pull one over on this guy.
No, I see that.
Okay. That's good. We got that cleared up. Now, do you guys call it Canadian bacon, or you just call it ham, but when you try to sell it to us, you call it Canadian bacon?
I think here the term is interchangeable. I don't eat it much, so I'm not an expert, but I think here it's interchangeable. But probably when we hawk it to you guys, we put some fancy name on it.
Right. Well, because you know that we Americans, we eat bacon for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and whatever the stereotypical American bacon consumption is. So that's good. That's smart on your end. All right. Well, I wanted to start off with a bit of levity there at your expense, because I know that you've got a story that's tough, man. I've read a good bit of your book, and I've listened to your story on a couple of different podcasts, and it's one of those where it's both tragic, but it's also inspirational. And I hate to even ask you to tell it, because it's tough. But I think it's necessary for guys to understand how you got on this road of vulnerability and what that looks like from your perspective. I think it's going to give people really a lot of insight into why it is that you do what you do and why you're on the mission that you're on. So if you could, just give us some backstory as to how you got down this road.
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to. So, I mean, I grew up in a military family. We sort of moved all over the place, and I kind of grew up with a very traditional definition of what it meant to be a man. Most guys know what that is, right? Mm-hmm. Strong, emotionless, make decisions based on logic. Showing your emotions is weakness. Yada yada yada. Kind of the alpha male stereotype, which was okay. I mean, it was serving me okay. It seemed to be working. I mean, I was, I had spent some time in the military where that kind of attitude fits right in. Mm-hmm. I started a corporate job, climbing the corporate ladder. Everything seemed to be going okay. I was married, had 2 young daughters, very young daughters. And then my wife got very, very sick. She was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And looking back on it with the benefit of hindsight, I mean, I can see well back into the past a lot of red flags or indications that there was a storm on the horizon, I guess. But I didn't have any context or life experience to understand what was happening. And it was really, really important to me to sort of present a image to the world that I had it all together, man. Like, I was an up-and-comer. I was, living a great life. I was the kind of guy that other people should want to emulate. And so that really, I think, blinded me in some ways to trouble brewing. Yeah. But regardless, once our second daughter was born, we have 2 daughters. My wife, Cindy, was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, which is, it's also called manic depression. I think it was called that, in the older, maybe by previous generations. But for your listeners who don't know what it is, it's a mental illness that is characterized by periods of mania, which is just, I mean, it's the most incredible behavior, man. She was a police officer, actually, and she went on disability, but she ended up living in a homeless shelter, checked into rehab, was institutionalized. She moved 3 hours away for 5 months, leaving me with a six-month-old daughter and a 2-year-old daughter at home. Crazy spending money, risky sexual behaviors, rage, living off drugs and alcohol, like extreme weight loss, no sleep, just completely irrational, erratic, dangerous, risky behavior. It was horrible. I had no idea of what was happening. And then the flip side of that, which is why they call it bipolar, is, basically crushing, soul-destroying depression. And for me, I was one of those guys that, for no reason, just thought that depression was weakness. So if I was strong and I had never been depressed, therefore people that were depressed were weak. I mean, that was basically the extent of the thought I gave it. But when I witnessed it firsthand, I mean, one of the reasons I really like talking about this, even though it can be painful, is that, man, unless you've seen it, and a lot of people have, but many people haven't, unless you've seen it or experienced it firsthand, or, seen a loved one go through it, there's no way you can imagine what it's like.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, her depression was, she couldn't even lift her arm to get a glass of water.
Jeez.
It was, every nerve ending in her body felt like it was exposed. We're talking like sobbing for days on end. I mean, suicidal thoughts and the whole bit. So, this went on for 6 years, and there was various periods of, her being institutionalized for her own safety. I think I mentioned she got electroshock therapy. I didn't even know what that was. I thought that was like some kind of relic from the 50s.
Yes, exactly. Right.
They still do it. And it's for really the most extreme cases of depression. But it wipes out, it eliminates your short-term memory. So I would go see her and at the hospital, and I would get a phone call from her as I'm on my way home, with her being hysterical that I never come to see her. And there was moments during that time period where I thought I was losing my mind myself.
Yeah.
And, just trying to keep it together too. Trying to raise my daughters, trying to keep working, trying to keep my wife alive. It was brutal. And so what happened with me was, because I wouldn't, because my traditional definition of manhood and strength, I didn't really have an outlet to deal with what was going on. My attitude at the time was, I'm not going to talk about this, okay? Because no amount of talking about it is going to make her not sick.
Right.
And there's too many other things to do right now. I got to try to get through today somehow. So, and then what would happen is I would have these, normal human reactions to extreme stress, where I might have an anxiety attack, or I might break down just sobbing, or I might, there's times I've, blurted my life story out to the person behind me in line at the grocery store, and all of these types of things. And what I didn't see them as like, a normal reaction to extreme stress. I saw them as myself starting to fall apart. And, if I did that, my family was doomed, and there was no way I could let that happen. So I started drinking to try to keep my emotions in check. It was because it was really the only option I had left myself to deal with them. Right. So, yeah. It's funny, in my mind, it kind of seemed to work actually, because at the time, I had, because I felt less anxiety and I felt less fear and sadness when I was drunk. I was drunk. Right. So, and then, but at the same time, I also robbed myself of feeling like hope and joy and optimism. And I needed those emotions more than ever at that time. And they were already, in short supply. So, I really kind of screwed myself over there, really, but I couldn't see it. I just could not see it. And ultimately, Cindy committed suicide just about almost 7 years ago now. And, having to go through the experience of sitting my kids down and telling them their mom was dead was, obviously very traumatic for me. And I just, to make a long story short, I guess, I just couldn't admit to myself that I was suffering, right? So after she passed away, I just told myself, okay, that chapter's closed. It's time to move on. I built a new life. I remarried, we built a new family, but I kept drinking every single day. And not a little bit, right? So, but I had all these excuses, that made sense to me at the time. Look, I've been through hell. I raised these kids through hell. I built a new family. I've got a good job. I'm fit. I'm whatever. I'm better than lots of other people, as if that makes any difference. But to me, it made sense at the time because I was so desperately clinging to these rationalizations for my behavior. And so basically my point of view was, I've been through all this. Leave me alone. If I want to drink, man, I've kind of deserved it.
Right.
And,
right.
That I think that made, I guess there's maybe some kind of argument that could have been made for that might have made sense for a little while. But I was still saying the same stuff for 4 years. And it just started to wear really thin. Not with me. I thought I was making perfect sense. But, my wife started to pressure me, and not pressure me from an angry point of view, though, more pressure me from come on, man, you're not living up to your capabilities here. And I really thought I was. And then ultimately what happened was on August 30th of 2014, I was going to spend the day with my daughter, my 9-year-old daughter at the time. And, I promised just a daddy-daughter day and told her I was going to make it really special. And it was just going to be the two of us and the whole bit. And when the day came around, I just got shit-faced all day long. Did nothing. She played by herself. And at the end of the day, she came up to me and looked me in the eye and told me she was disappointed in me. And that was it, man. Wow. I have never, ever felt worse about myself. But it was the exact thing I needed to, you know, it was that moment I needed to. I couldn't run anymore. I mean, Jesus, my 9-year-old just told me she was disappointed in me. I mean, you can't really rationalize that away.
Right.
So, yeah, I just kind of, I guess, surrendered or allowed myself to become vulnerable with myself. And I always tell her, I've told her, and I tell other people that her having the courage to be honest with me gave me the courage to be honest with myself. And that's ultimately what I needed. And, you know, it just ever since that moment, my life, man, has been totally different. So that's the backstory.
Jeez. That is tough. And I appreciate you sharing that. I know that as part of what you do, you got to, you know, recount these events over and over again. But it means a lot. You know, I was thinking about how, I don't want to say fortunate it is for you, but in one sense that it was good that you were still able to feel enough that her disappointment in you didn't drive you to drink more, right? That it caused you to turn a corner in the good way. Because a lot of times my dad was is an alcoholic. And so I know that by saying, you know, Dad, I'm disappointed in you. I wish, you know, you'd come to pick me up so we could have gone and done something. That would have just driven him into further, you know, into this depression and down that dark alley. But, but for you, it caused you to turn that path, man. I think that in itself is an amazing thing because a lot of guys, they go the opposite route, you know.
Yeah, you know, I think I thought about that a lot, actually. And like, what was it about that specific moment, you know, that because I just had a total sense of clarity. And I think really what it was I already knew all this, you know, like, I mean, she didn't tell me anything. Like by saying that to me, she just let me admit what I already knew. But I just it's such a weird internal battle that goes on in your head because, you know, there's part of you that knows what you're saying is BS. And there's a part of you that is just so desperately clinging to this, these lies that you've constructed. It's like a prison that you've constructed in your own mind. And, you know, you don't know how to get out of it. And it's funny, you know, because I can remember talking to my wife sometimes thinking, man, like I could see her evolving as a human being. And I could see that, wait a minute, like she's starting to become spiritual. She's like becoming, you know, building a community. She's involved with the kids' school. And I'm pretty stagnant here, man. Like I can see this, right? But right. I'm just too scared to do anything about it. And then there's times near the end of my, you know, when I was near the end of drinking, when I would be talking to her and just like rationalizing these things. And I'd almost be able to hear myself like objectively, like almost like from outside my body or whatever. I could hear my voice and I would think, God, you sound insane. What has happened to you? You know? And so I think it was, I don't know, maybe it was, I had a good upbringing. I had good parents. Like, I think I had a solid foundation and I had really just painted myself into some kind of corner that I just needed some help getting out of. But when my daughter, so, you know, I think that's the reason is my daughter just really gave me the courage to take this step I desperately wanted to take. I mean, there was times I'd be talking to my wife, rationalizing my drinking, and man, I was seriously screaming inside my head. But I wanted to just say, I need help. Yeah. You know, I want, please help me. But doing that meant that I would basically be admitting that everything I had said up until that point was a lie, you know, and I just could not make my lips say the words. I could not do it. And, but I wanted to so bad. And I guess, so maybe that's the reason, you know, is my daughter just kind of gave me the kick over the cliff that I, you know, yeah. I wanted to jump, but she, you know, she helped me do it. Maybe that's the reason.
So did you, while you're kind of going through this and your wife was going through this, did you have any friends that you're reaching out to at all to say, hey guys, I'm struggling with this. My wife's going crazy. I'm going crazy. I know you said you didn't want to talk about it, but was there anybody in your life that you could confide in?
I mean, I would talk, I guess, every once in a while to some, you know, friend or two, but not really. I mean, I talked to my parents about it because I desperately needed their help to, you know, with just the kids and everything while I'm chasing my wife around the province of Ontario, basically trying to find where she is half the time. So, yeah, but no, not really. I mean, I didn't never talk about it, but I didn't talk about it as often as I as I needed to.
Right. If you had, I mean, looking back, if you had that band of brothers to confide in, do you think that would have been a big help to you?
Absolutely, it would have. I had no appreciation of that time about the importance of a tribe. I didn't. It wasn't even on my radar, man. I didn't even know it was a thing, and it would have, because at the time, my very immature worldview, like I said earlier, was that if I talk about it, she'll still be sick. Yeah. Therefore, there's no point in talking about it. It's so obvious to me now that if I had talked about it, it would have created space in my mind to think of better ways of dealing with it. It would have given me different insights and wisdom from other people, that I could apply to my life. I mean, there's a million reasons why talking openly about what's happening in your life is a powerful tool to, move yourself forward. If I knew then what I knew now, oh my God, I would have handled it totally differently.
Yeah. Well, and I think that even getting in that sort of mode of, I'm going to meet some guys that want to talk about serious things and grow together, there's a sense of vulnerability just in that, right? To put yourself out there. But at the same time, we tend to look at vulnerability as this sort of weakness, right? Anytime emotions come up in our minds, we sort of rationalize them away, which is kind of like what you're doing, even with the drinking. But rather than face the emotions, why is it that that's the case? Why do we so strongly object as men? In most cases, I'm sure there are guys that are on the other side of the spectrum, but for the most part, we shy away from emotions and want to go more towards the rationalization. And why do we see emotions as weakness?
That's a great question. And I think that a lot of it must be historical about the traditional roles men have played. I mean, when there's a tribe to be protected, it falls on the men. When there's war, men are typically the ones that go to war. The hard, horrible jobs, the risky, dangerous jobs are typically done by men. I mean, those jobs don't have a lot of room for, emotional development, let's say. But having said that, there's a lot of guys today that aren't more guys than ever as, our society becomes, more productive and wealthier and all this stuff. I mean, a lot of those things aren't as much of an issue in people's lives now. And a lot of us live pretty comfortably. And I bet you if you were to ask a guy, the average guy, why is it? The same question you just asked me, I bet you guys would have no idea why they think that. Actually, I don't know. It's just how my dad was, and it's how it's supposed to be. But what's interesting is that it's amazing when I've had so many opportunities now, whether one-on-one or whether, online or whether in mastermind groups or coaching or whatever, where, man, as soon as people ultimately we all want to be accepted as our authentic selves. That's what we want a lot of times more than anything, but we're just too afraid that if we show our authentic selves, we'll be rejected. But when you get a bunch of guys, again, either one-on-one or in a group setting, as soon as they realize it's safe, man, the floodgates just open up. Yeah. It's a beautiful thing to be able to see and to be, play a small part in. And it's so powerful, man. Once this happens, it's a massive catalyst for guys making positive changes for the future. Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I really do. And I think this is really important to get across. I think a lot of guys are going to listen to this podcast and they're going to go, really? Vulnerability? Really? Thanks 2017, Yeah. But I think it's absolutely important. And I think that we've got to become good at the things that we're not necessarily good at by default. I mean, by default, most guys we fix things and we defend things. That's sort of our default setting. We want to fix a problem or we want to, fight a problem or defend something. And most of the time, those are fairly clear cut, like, the dishwasher's broken, I can fix that. Or, somebody's, trying to shoot at me, I can shoot back, or whatever the case may be. And we can kind of understand those things. And I think that's actually because of a sort of a limitation on our own development. I think that when we get into the area of emotions, that now we're talking about things that aren't necessarily very clear cut. And we don't feel strong in that area. And so we kind of shy away from it. And I think that, growing in that area, there's nothing wrong with that we've absolutely got to grow in the area of being able to say, how is it that I feel? Why do I feel this way? What's going on? And let me express that to somebody else. Sometimes I've reflected, I think even on the podcast before, how if you go back and you read letters and things from men of, the Enlightenment period and on up until probably the early 1900s,
I'm not going to say they were very in touch with their emotions, but there was they had a lot more words to describe what it was they were feeling and what they were seeing and things of that nature. They were more free to tell other men, like, that's a handsome guy, or you're a good looking fellow, right? And I think there was a sense of vulnerability that somehow, I don't know if it's through, like you said, just Westernism or maybe the modern idea of what it means to be a man, but some of those things have just been kind of lost, and we've become more stoic rather than pursuing that and becoming more well-rounded men.
I could not agree more. And, I totally get what you're saying, too, about what guys, how they perceive the idea of vulnerability, because what I tell people is it's not walking around barfing your feelings all over the face of everybody that you come into contact with. And it's not sitting down, you don't have to sit down and watch Oprah and bawl your head off, at some sad story. That's not what it is. It's that vulnerability, man, it makes you unbelievably more powerful in the sense that you have a vastly more developed ability to influence people and events. It's crazy how it works. I mean, because again, what happens is when you're vulnerable, I mean, there's things that flow from vulnerability, right? I mean, and so let me actually, maybe before we get into this, I'll just say, like, the way I define vulnerability is having the courage to look yourself in the mirror and be honest and without judgment about who you see staring back at you. And that's really hard to do sometimes. Sometimes to be able to take sort of like a fearless, judgment-free inventory of ourselves, we're the hardest person to share it with.
Yeah.
Because it can be really a tough thing to do. But here, the thing is, if you can do that, like, vulnerability changes, my life is screwed up and therefore I'm a screw up, to where I am right now is a necessary step on the journey to the future I'm going to create with my choices. And there's a big difference there, man. Vulnerability gives you, kind of, if I use myself as an example, like when I was, rationalizing and afraid, just so afraid to change, my inability to be vulnerable made me a protector of what is instead of becoming a builder of what could be. And what do you want to be? I mean, come on, guys, nobody wants to just cling with a death grip to the status quo, no matter how shitty it is. No, we want to look to let it go and use the lessons we've learned from that and create a different future, man, and take ownership over our lives and over the future that we have the power to create. And the first step in doing that is allowing yourself to become vulnerable. And because the things that flow from vulnerability are amazing. Humility flows directly from vulnerability, right? Hey, if I've got some things in my life that are messy and screwed up, we all do, right? Yeah. And so that means that I'm no better or no worse than you. We're all just unique, and we're all on our own journey. And accepting that, like, I used to have this massive superiority complex, thinking I was better than a lot of people. And man, what a stupid way to look at the world and interact with people, So when I was finally able to become humble, the way I interacted with people was so much more mutually beneficial. Authenticity flows from vulnerability, because if I'm okay with who I am, I'm okay with showing other people who I am. And when other people see who I am, oh my God, man, they're going to be drawn to me, because my authenticity creates a safe place for them to be authentic. And how many chances do we have in our lives, like on a day-to-day basis, to actually just be ourselves? And if you can be the person that creates a space for people to do that, you become super powerful, man. People will flock to you and to the space that you create for them to be themselves. And this is really the message I want to get, is if you want to play a bigger game, have a bigger impact, be of service to more people, vulnerability is the key to starting yourself down the path of being able to do that.
Man, that's really great, man. Excellent words. And I'll just commend you, because I know we've interacted a good bit on Facebook. We've spoken over the phone or over Skype, I think once or twice. And, you are a very genuine guy. And I don't know what the old Jason MacKenzie was like, but you're very likable, and you're right. People are drawn to you. There's a certain thing about your personality. Actually, I think one of the first times I saw you was in a video. You're doing something with your daughters. I don't know what it was at this point, but you were just doing some sort of not necessarily vulnerable, anything like that kind of video. You're just hanging out with your kids. And just your personality. It was very much like, hey, I'm just going to be me, and I'm going to be vulnerable and genuine and authentic. And I think you're right. That absolutely does draw people in. And so I appreciate you setting the example on that.
Thank you very much.
So how does this idea of being vulnerable, how does this translate into things like gym life, or you're hanging out with your buds, or you're at work, or what have you? You know, how do we make this a practical thing that we do, and it's just part of our everyday existence?
You know, that's a great question, because I've really gone through this experience, especially with some of my guy friends, where, you know, we had, especially when I was drinking, like I had a number of relationships that were basically, I mean, they revolved around getting drunk together, right? For years and years and years. And it was always a good time and all that. And so what's interesting is this is one of the things that I was very frightened of, like really scared, was what is going to happen to all my, like, these relationships that I have with people, because I don't know how to interact with them sober, man. Like, you know, like I don't really know how to do that. And am I going to have no friends? And am I going to, you know, do I even have any friends right now? I don't even know. So, and what the craziest thing has happened is, like, over the past, 2.5 years, man, we just started, as I became, like, vulnerability is a journey. So you don't automatically, like, I didn't wake up, the day after that incident with my daughter and be like, okay, man, I'm going to be like super authentic now. And it didn't, that's not how it happened. It just became, I started talking a little bit more about some things that had happened to me. And, as drinking receded further into the past, I started learning some lessons about that. And I started becoming more free, from it. And I started feeling more able to talk about it. And then as people reacted to it in a very positive way, and I started having all these meaningful conversations, I felt more comfortable to talk about it more and more and more and more. And it's just like this, self-fulfilling prophecy or whatever. And with my guy friends, it really is, our relationships have completely changed. It's amazing to see. We talk about things that are real. We talk about our families, our futures, our fears, our, just stuff that's actually real. And it didn't happen overnight. It's taken 2.5 years to get to this point. But I expect also, when I look 2.5 years into the future from right now, I mean, I think our relationships are just going to continue to be deeper, and it's absolutely awesome. I have no interest anymore in having the kind of traditional guy relationship where don't get me wrong, I like to burp and fart as much as the next guy. Yeah. But, that's not really, sort of the center of gravity on which a relationship can be, built. So, and as far as, stuff like the gym, like, this is another amazing example. So I am fitter and stronger and faster at almost 44 years old than I ever have been in my life. And I've worked out since I was 15. And what's crazy is I used to work out, especially when I was drinking heavily. I used to work out, and it was a way of, in my mind, of canceling out the damage I did to myself the night before, right? So it was oh yeah, I'm going to get shit-faced. And if I go to the gym at 6 o'clock in the morning, that shows that drinking is not a problem, right?
That's right. And, yeah.
Like, these are the actual things that people who have these self-destructive behaviors. These are the actual things you think about. That makes sense at the time. Look back on them now and they just sound crazy. But so what happened with me, though, is as I became more vulnerable, I started opening my mind to the fact that, wow, my worldview is super limited right now. Like, because all the fears that I had about stopping drinking, about not being able to socialize, about blah, 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 none of them came true. So when none of them came true, I started to say to myself, that's weird. Like, I mean, I wonder what other self-limiting beliefs I have here, because this major thing that kept me paralyzed for years was all made up. That's a pretty powerful realization. And so as I started to open my mind to the fact that the world was much more expansive than I had let myself to believe. I mean, I thought I had everything figured out, by the time I was 30. And so I started listening to podcasts, and I started listening to, for example, The Miracle Morning with Hal Elrod. I always talk about this book, but it completely changed my life. And what happened was I started realizing that my physical health, it's not about how many crunches I do. It's about my emotional, spiritual, and mental health. And the more I develop those aspects of me, the fitter I will get, because I will make better choices. I will be more open to learning new information. I will understand that I am worthy of achieving greatness and all of these things. And all of a sudden I started to get super fit, and I rode my bike 4,500 miles last year, and all this crazy stuff, and it felt great, but it was almost like a byproduct of, I call it the spiritual six pack, right? It's not about the crunches, right? It's about developing you as a whole human being, and vulnerability gave me the permission and the freedom to start being able to explore some of these concepts and ideas that were all around me all the time. I just wasn't willing or able to see them. Man,
I can absolutely guarantee you that what you just said there, that segment is going to revolutionize some people's lives. I think they're going to hear that and they're going to go, that's right. That's exactly what I need to be doing.
Yeah.
That's good.
I just want to tell you a quick story. So I about that. A contractor was working on our house last year, and he came up to me, and he was 50 years old or whatever, and pretty out of shape. And I'd be riding my bike home, and he said, "Oh man, what workout routine do you do?" Same question as always, like how many sets and reps of whatever do you do? Yeah. And I said, what routine? He goes, "What routine do you think I should do?" And I said, "The first thing you should do is you should commit for the next 2 weeks to at least once a day, holding the door open for a stranger, looking them in the eye, and when they say thank you, say you're welcome." Because being kind to people is going to result in them showing you appreciation. And the reason you are in the situation that you are in is because for some reason you don't think you're worthy of being better. So when you do things that cause people to show you gratitude and appreciation, you're going to understand that you are worthy of those feelings, man. And when you can embrace that, it's going to give you the power to make a whole bunch of different choices in your life. They're going to produce the results you want. You know what I mean? So just do some acts of kindness for a couple weeks and come back and see me and let me know how it goes.
Yeah. Man, that's awesome. It really is. It takes some guts and some vulnerability to say that to a strange guy that's there to fix your house or whatever. But no, I can see that though. I like this idea because a lot of times we want to take the straightforward approach. This is once again goes back to guys wanting to fix things or defend things. We want to meet it head on, which is not bad. But sometimes we need to be able to flank our problems. We can't just come, straight against it and say, give me your sets, give me your reps, I'll do your routine and I'll be as fit as you. There's always something else going on that we kind of need to take it from a different angle. So I think it's really good. So I want to jump into your book a little bit. So you've written a book called The Deadly Book of Open. And I thought it was kind of fun because when I went on Amazon to find this, it changed my search results to The Deadly Book of Open, which comes up with a lot of really cool books. I'm like, there's a lot of good reading here. But the Deadly Book of Open, and obviously you share your story there. The way that it's written from a very vulnerable kind of approach, a very genuine kind of approach, where you just basically say, here's how I am, here's life, and whatnot. But I also know that there are always challenges that go along with any kind of book writing process. But particularly because of the nature of this, just the subject here that we're talking about, was there anything that really made it difficult for you? Were there any points in the book where you're just like, I don't know if I want to share that, or I don't know if that's something that, where you wanted to kind of hold back and not really just give it your all or be as open as you might otherwise be? Not
really. I mean, it's such an, I know you're going through this process now too, and it's such an interesting process to go through because basically what you're doing, so just to dispel, if there's any of your audience, I'm sure there's many, because most of us, I'm sure, have said at some point, I want to write a book, but there's no way I can do it. Trust me, man. If I can do it, you can totally do it, because I guess people think that you need to have all kinds of in-depth knowledge and be like a PhD about some subject. And seriously, I can remember talking to my daughter who was 12, and I'm like, the book had to be like 75,000 words. I think I've told you the story, but I'm 10,000 words in and I got nothing. There's nothing left to say. Like, seriously, I'm talking to my wife, my kids. There is not one other word I can possibly write about this. I'm done, and I don't know what I'm going to do. And but what happens is, and this is a really important lesson to apply to any area of your life, as you spend time focused on something and you think deeply about a specific topic for a long time over a period of like months, because it took me about, I don't know, say 4 months, I guess, to write the book.
Yeah.
Man, you developed a lot of insights about it, and so I finished the book vastly more knowledgeable about the subject, but also about myself than I did when I started. So no, I didn't really have any questions about what I should or shouldn't share, because I really had committed to myself that anything that was relevant to, making the points I was trying to make in the book, I was going to share it. So, but another thing about the book really is how the whole thing came about, right? Is, and this is another maybe we can talk about, but it's the idea of when you're of service to people and you're vulnerable and you show your authentic self to the world, amazing things happen to you. So a guy crossed paths, just emailed me out of the blue and said, "Hey, I've seen the stuff you're doing online and it's really resonating with me. And I've written 8 books and I've been on Oprah and I have a relationship with a book publisher. Are you interested in writing a book?" And I'm like, okay, and that was about I had started writing a book at that time, but I didn't know how to write a book. I was like 60 pages in, and I was saying to my wife at the time, I don't even know what this is about anymore. I don't know who it's for. It's gibberish. I can't even because there's a process you kind of have to go through. And he actually helped me get a book deal. He helped me write the whole book proposal. He helped me write the book outline, all out of just generosity and a belief in what I was doing. And what he said to me was the first time that I really had an understanding that we are surrounded by people that want to help us. All we have to do is show up and be seen and let them see us and hear us. And what he said to me was I was just so blown away by his generosity. And he said to me, "Look, man, I believe in what you're doing. And you need to understand that I am not the only person who wants to help you." And that moment when he said that, I was like, "Oh my God, wow! What might that mean for my life?" And it's totally true, man. Totally true.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And this is something I definitely struggle with. I think most guys do. Is this idea that we don't have to do it all on our own or by ourselves. I have this sort of feeling, and I think you probably had this as well, maybe when you're going through what you were going through, that if I share my problems or my needs with other people, then I'm burdening them. And I don't want to do that. I'm going to carry those on my own. And I would rather deal with it on my own than burden somebody else with it, right? But you're absolutely right. There are people out there who are saying, "No, I want to help you with this." If somebody comes to me with an issue, I want to help them with it. I love to be approached with issues, especially ones that are in my wheelhouse that I think I can solve. And so I think even being vulnerable, certainly goes into that area as well. Just being open, putting yourself out there, and then you're right. People will find ways to help you out. That's really cool that happened.
Yeah, and to what you just said about wanting to do it alone, man, you're right. There's so many people that don't want to ask for help. And I don't know, we get this idea that we have to do things on our own. But as I have embarked on this entrepreneurial journey and left the corporate world, I haven't done anything on my own. It's all been through the partnership and support of all kinds of different people. And one of the best ways I've heard somebody describe this was to say that when you help somebody, it feels good. So if you need help and you don't ask for it, you are robbing someone of the opportunity to make a contribution that makes them feel good about themselves. And don't be that kind of person, because robbing people of that opportunity is not the kind of person that creates the most enduring legacy in the world, right? So just ask for help, man. We all need it. So I'm flying. I'll give you a quick example. I'm flying to Portland tomorrow for a 2-day speaking gig.
All right.
And yeah, it's amazing. I got this gig. So here's what happened. I was kind of going into becoming an entrepreneur and wanted to become a speaker. And I'm like, I don't even know how to do that. I have no idea how to become a speaker. So I made a video, I put it on Facebook, and I said, look, how do you do this? I don't know how to do it. I could really use some help. And some pretty big players reached out to me and said, hey, I got this thing this event. I mean, I can't pay you for it, but if you want, I'll coach you on how to, coach you as far as speaking goes. I'll give you the video, and you can speak at the event, and there's going to be some really high level guys there. And it just, out of that opportunity came a relationship with this guy who hired me to do this speaking gig in Portland. And I think it's going to be the start of a long-term mutually beneficial relationship. And it's all because I just said, I have no idea what I'm doing. Please help.
Yeah. That's awesome, because you basically got a job by saying, I don't know what I'm doing, right? You put that. And there's the fear of, if I put this out here saying I don't know what I'm doing, nobody's going to hire me, right? That's how we would rationalize it typically. We would say, people are going to realize that I'm new at all of this. Why would they, want to bring me on to talk to people, influence people and whatnot? But you're right. Absolutely. How we rationalize the world is really, so often we're trying to get we're trying to make the reality of the world conform to our beliefs as they exist. We're not really trying to accept the world as it is. And the world as it is really filled with all kinds of helpful people that aren't as we make them out to be. So
you are so right, man. And I'll tell you just one more quick story, because it's such a perfect example of the limiting beliefs that people have. So I have a buddy of mine, best friend. He's a senior leader in a software development company, and this is what vulnerability gives you. It gives you the ability to deploy all of yourself into the world to create opportunities. And so he wants to go into his own business, and he wants to do consulting, like basically do the same thing, but do consulting. Yeah. But he gets stuck where everybody gets stuck. I don't know how to market. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how to get any customers. So basically I'm done. Like before I even get started, I'm done. And so what I told him was, let's take a look at you in totality, man. And let's see what, let me help you think about this in a different way. So you have a 17-year-old daughter who you have a friggin' amazing relationship. There are fathers all around the world that would kill to have the relationship with their daughter that you have with yours. You have a son who has he's got some type of, I think, learning disability. But yeah. I've known this guy for 15 years, and I don't even know what it is, because they never label it that way. They label their son as unique and special and who has an amazing contribution to make. They fight against the school system. And I was saying to him, how many parents are in the same situation? You could give them a voice. Or you've been married for 20 years and you're happy, man. Yeah. Like, there's tons of people that would kill for that. And if you put that, say with your relationship with your daughter, if you find the courage to say, make a video, write a blog, whatever, host a webinar, just go on a podcast, find some way to talk to guys about how to have a good relationship with their daughter. There might be a guy who runs a software company who's looking to start some new business, but can't find the time to do it because he's got such a crappy relationship with his teenage daughter that it's taking up all his time. That's how you create opportunities. Opportunity creation is not linear. It is deploying all of yourself into the world to be of service, and it is nuts what happens when you do that, right? So I just get super passionate about this subject, because most people think to go from point A to point, to point B, it's only it's one step to get there. And man, it's not,
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. And this is one of the reasons I love talking to people on the podcast, is because I'll bring somebody on for a particular subject, right? Vulnerability or whatever it happens to be. And there's a wealth of information that people have, a wealth of knowledge and insight that people have, not just information. Just like what you just said. There are different points of views that we probably wouldn't think about, and it has to do with the fact that you've approached the world at sort of a different angle, and you're seeing things a little bit differently, and we need to open our minds up to that as well. Man, that's really good.
It's funny. I was talking to somebody the other day, and they go about something specific. She goes, "You are so smart." And I said, I'm not. Look, I failed grade 10 music and I failed grade 11 math almost twice. Like, I am of average intelligence. The only reason I have any insights about this stuff is because I spend so much time talking about it. Yeah. If I had been spending the last 2.5 years fixing bicycles, I'd be amazing at doing that, right? But so being vulnerable gives you a whole different opportunity to take the knowledge that you already have inside you, have the courage to put it out in the world, and then put it into the marketplace of ideas and have it bump up against other people's and combined and get new insights. And I mean, that's how it works, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And this is exactly what I expect to happen for the guys that are listening to this podcast. They're going to get these new insights. They're going to go, oh, I've never thought about the world in that kind of way. And now I will. It'll change the way they live. All right. Well, let's close up here. I really appreciate having you on. I wanted to ask you one last question. How is becoming more open and more real and that kind of man, how has it really changed your view or your idea of what it means to be a man or of manliness?
It has made me understand that I am at my most effective and most powerful when I bring all of me to bear on the world. That's really what it boils down to. It's helped me bring people closer to me where we can support each other and do amazing things. It's made me more courageous because I realize that if I fail, it's no big deal. I can learn the lessons and move on. And it's made me wiser because I am open to feedback and I don't judge, other people's opinions. And I just have a lot more inputs into my life to be able to sort of up my body of knowledge. And I mean, if being stronger, wiser, and more courageous is not sort of at the heart of what being more manly is, I don't know what is, man.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Very good. Great answer. Well, man, it's a pleasure to know you. I really appreciate just being on the ground floor of your endeavor here, both in terms of your entrepreneurial aspects of what you're shooting for here, even get a chance to hear how your speaking goes, reading your book and all these things, and just to know you, to see you operate. It's impressive, and it's been great talking to you here on the podcast, and I look forward to just seeing you grow, man, over the years.
Thank you very much. I really, really enjoyed our conversation, man.
Thanks. Well, man, there you have it. Another good conversation with another good man. If this episode really impacted you, be sure to reach out to Jason, reach out to me, and let us know. And until next time, keep your powder dry, and may a fair wind be always in your sails.